Hi guys, I'm Jolene Ballard Gutierrez, and I graduated from here almost 20 years ago. So it's really nice and kind of weird, but nice to be back. And I just want to talk with you guys today a little bit about writing. My book, Devil May Care, and that's a little image of what the cover, well, it's kind of the cover flipped upside down, but that's an image based on the cover. Oh, you're moving it around. I'm like, I have copies. I could. So that's my book. It's a young adult paranormal romance book. I also write some middle grade, so books for middle school students, and I'm working on a book right now that's that genre, and I've done some picture books as well, so kind of everything. And so today, I don't want to talk to you necessarily about just this book, but I want to talk to you about writing and why we write and why writing is important. So, sorry guys, I'm going to scooch. Let me move this back a little bit, and then we can go. There we go. Okay, so when I was in second grade, Mr. Becker was my teacher. Have you guys had Mr. Becker?
Yes.
So he was my teacher in second grade, and I think my class was his first teaching job, like first year of teaching. But he offered to do something that was really a kind thing. He said that if any of us wrote outside of class, he would type our stories or our whatever we wrote, books, up into published books. So he typed on his own typewriter, and he made little published books like this one. This is one of my stories. This is The Astronaut, and it's from my Fun Stories book. So for me, as a little kid, this was a huge deal, and it was kind of my first taste of like what it feels like, what a cool feeling it is to have your work published. So I never really forgot that, and that kind of made me all of my life have this dream of being an author and writing. But what I want to talk to you guys a little bit more about today is more like why writing is important for all of us, for society. And for me, one of the big reasons is freedom, and freedom to be creative, freedom of our ideas. And in some places and at some times, writing has been outlawed for certain people. So here's a quote, there we go, thank you. Here's a quote, it's still tough to read because it looks darker up there than it does on my screen. But this is from the South Carolina legislation in 1740. And it says, "Be it enacted that all and every person and persons whatsoever who shall hereafter teach or cause any slave or slaves to be taught to write, or shall use or employ any slave as a scribe in any manner of writing whatsoever, hereafter taught to write, every such person or persons shall, for every such offense, forfeit the sum of £100 current money." So they were going to charge a ton of money to people who taught or used slaves taught them writing, had them write as scribes or whatever. So why would the South Carolina legislature be so concerned with slaves knowing how to write?
They didn't want them to advance.
They'd be more educated? I'm sorry.
They didn't want them to advance.
They didn't want them to advance? Exactly. Other thoughts? Okay. Yeah, I think that's it exactly. Because when you know how to write, you can share your ideas. Those ideas live on after you're gone even, or you can pass those notes on. And it allows people to kind of get out of this stagnant mindset and to question things. So the slaves that learned how to write maybe were questioning, why am I a slave, and why do they have more rights than I do? And in South Carolina, they did not want, at that time, they did not want those questions being asked. So, and it kind of reminds me of the characters on WALL-E, just all like sitting there in their chairs and drinking their food and not really questioning anything, just taking life as it comes to them. Stagnant minds that aren't thinking and questioning and writing and being creative, means that you end up as a drone or as someone who just, and it's more like this part of the definition, someone who is a lagger, someone who's lazy, someone who's more robotic and not really questioning things, just kind of going through the actions. So for a second, I want you guys to just think about a world without words. And before you think, oh, that would be awesome, because maybe for you, if you don't like to read or write, maybe that does sound good. I don't mean just for you personally. I mean for the entire world. No words. What does that mean? What does that look like? Yeah, it could look that way. Yeah. So, no talking. It would be much quieter. That's true. And sometimes that's a good thing, but maybe not necessarily always. What else? What might it mean if we had no words, no reading, no writing?
No advancements.
No advancements, yeah. Kind of back to the slavery thing, right? You're stuck where you're at because it's tough to have new ideas without the words that go along with those ideas. But writing is difficult. It's not something that comes naturally to us. So in the millions of years that humans have been changing and evolving, and some things humans have been doing for a long, long time. The flight or fight response and hunting and things like that, those are pretty natural and instinctual. But writing, well, when you take a step back, like cave pictures, cave drawings, and petroglyphs are about 40,000 or 50,000 years old. So the art piece has been around for a while, and that's still a form of communication for sure. But writing itself, and this is cuneiform from Mesopotamia, is about 4,000 to 5,000 years old. So it hasn't been around that long. And so it's not something that's just going to come second nature to us. It's something that we have to work at, and it's a struggle for most of us. So yeah, writing can be tough. I love that baby. Here's a quote from Stephen Leacock. He says, "Writing is not hard. Just get pencil and paper, or paper and pencil, sorry. Sit down and write as it occurs to you." So he's saying it's not physically tough to write. Anybody can, or most anybody can physically get pen, paper, and pencil and write. But he says the writing is easy. It's the occurring that's hard. So how many of you guys have a tough time coming up with ideas or thinking about what you should write? It's something that most of us have a tough time with. So I want to talk with you guys a little bit about the generation of ideas and how you can practice a little bit more with your writing. Now, my computer is not connecting to the internet, so I can't show you guys this YouTube clip. But at home, if you go to YouTube, if you want to see this, just type in Malcolm Gladwell's name. His name's right down here. And 10,000 hours, and it'll bring up this clip. Malcolm Gladwell is an author and a journalist, and one of his books is called Outliers, and in that book he talks about how 10,000 hours of anything that you practice will allow you to become more proficient in that thing that you're practicing. So he gives the Beatles as an example and talks about how they would play all these gigs night after night after night, and they became these amazing musicians. And he uses hockey players as an example as well. So it stands to reason that the more writing we do, the better we're going to get, right? So the more you practice, the better you'll be. Another thing that we need to think about, and it's really hard sometimes when you're like, I can't think of anything, I don't know what to write. But if you can just get started, just write something. And that's why probably some of your teachers have had you just brainstorm or do free writing activities to kind of tap into that part of your brain. Remember we talked about the brain part. If you tap into that language part of your brain, sometimes getting there gets you started and starts the wheels rolling, and you're better able to write. Annie Lamott is an author, and this is from her book Bird by Bird, some instructions on writing and life. And she says, quote, "Almost all good writing begins with terrible first efforts. You need to start somewhere. So just get started." Another tip from Annie Lamott is to catch your ideas. She uses an index card, and she just carries a folded index card in her pocket with a pen. And as she goes through her day, she may hear someone say something that really sparks an idea. She may see something, and she uses that index card to catch those ideas. I do something sort of similar. I use mostly Post-it notes, although I'll write on whatever I can find if I don't have Post-its. But I have Post-its like all over my house, in my car, on my desk at work. And when I think of something, I jot it there, and then later I can transfer it to a notebook at home or onto a computer file or whatever. And speaking of computers, so like if you guys come across a website that really makes you question something, you want to know more, it gives you an idea for writing or something like that, or a magazine article, bookmark that website or save that magazine article to come back to later, because that's a really good way to generate ideas as well. Another good idea generation device is to ask yourself, what if? So going back to the slavery example that we talked about, what if in 1740, instead of South Carolina saying, no slaves can learn how to write, if they do, we're going to fine you all this money, what if South Carolina said, we'll pay you if you teach your slaves to write? How would that change history? How would that look? And how would that change our times, like change the future, change the way things are in contemporary times? So just asking what if sometimes can spark those ideas too. And experimenting with formats, I think, is a really freeing thing. So you guys maybe have been told, you know, you need a 5-paragraph essay, or you need to give me a 10-page paper double-spaced, or, you know, sometimes the format is really very prescribed, and you have to do it that way because that's what your teacher has asked. But if you're writing for yourself, you can write in whatever format you'd like. And poetry is one of my favorite formats because, and I don't do rhyming poetry usually, I just do kind of free verse. You can, with poetry, anything goes. You can write whatever you'd like. And E.E. Cummings is a really good example. He's a poet, and this is a quote from him. He says, "Poetry happens to be an art, and artists happen to be human beings." If you guys notice, he didn't capitalize. He didn't put a space after the semicolon. And if you look at his poetry, he makes up his own words. He plays around with the way the letters are arranged in the poems. So that's why I like poetry, because it's just kind of like word painting, and it's very freeing, and you can write whatever you want, and it's okay. And same thing when you're talking about what a poem means to you. It can mean something to you that's totally different than it means to me, and that's okay too. So poetry is one format you can play around. There's also, you know, you can write letters. You can do things in almost like diary or journal format. You could do screenwriting, and there are probably lots of other formats that you guys can think of. But don't think that you always have to just sit down and write paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. Okay, so another way to think of ideas, to generate ideas, is to look around. So just observe the world around you. Pretend like you're an outsider. Pretend like you're an alien that just landed here on a spaceship, and look at the way people interact and watch them, and you'll probably come up with lots of great story writing ideas. This is another quote from our friend E.E. Cummings, and he says, "The world is mud luscious and puddle wonderful." So those are examples of him kind of inventing his own words. Mud luscious and puddle wonderful are not really real words, but they're words he's put together that mean something to him and probably mean something to you guys too. Okay, so finding an audience and or a mentor can be really helpful with your writing as well. When you are doing your writing and you're thinking about who you're writing for, that definitely informs the way your writing is going to look. So if your teacher has said, you know, I'm going to assign you guys a 5-paragraph essay, that essay is going to look different than a letter you write to a friend because it's two different audiences, right? So thinking about who your audience is, when I wrote Devil May Care, I knew I was writing for you guys, for high school students. And I thought of my own high school students that I work with at the school that I work at, and they were my audience. And so, and then the middle school book that I'm writing is not going to have some of the things that in this book, like there's some language and things like that I wouldn't put in the middle school book, and I definitely wouldn't put in my picture books. So just kind of knowing who you're writing for helps you to get some ideas about what your writing will be. And then finding a mentor or someone who, sorry, my calendar stuff is popping up. Anyway, finding a mentor or someone who can kind of critique your writing and give you their feedback and their honest thoughts is really a powerful thing too if writing is something that you're interested in. So I would encourage you to try to find someone, a teacher or an author or someone who can give you their thoughts to help kind of shape and grow your writing.